Well, welcome to Life Talk for this evening. A series that I think you're going to enjoy is called, as you can see right there, get my finger, I Quit. And tonight we're going to talk about quit making excuses. So let's bring in Joe and Kayla. They're going to be joining me in just a moment. When they get here, we're going to get everything set up. Hi, everybody.
Hey, how are you guys?
Hey.
All right. Well, I'm kind of makeshifting the video audio tonight. This is not my preferred setup, and these folks know the challenges I've had just getting here, but I'm here. So if I disappear, it's going to be the Joe and Kayla show. Okay, so
we'll get by.
Sounds like a pretty good talk show. I like it.
But we're glad to have you.
Well, thank you. And I love this series because excuses are something that we all make. And I quit. It's time to quit doing what isn't working for you. You know, usually we think of quitting as being bad. You know, we shouldn't be a quitter, all that sort of thing. But there's some things we just need to just, stop, put the brakes on. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So anyone want to add anything else to the introduction since this is brand new?
Basically, this whole series I'm very excited for. And I know I say that probably every series, but I love this. I love Life Talk. I love what we've learned each time. Like each topic we've done has been great. This one is especially great just because I do feel like, excuses, especially tonight as we're talking about that is something that we're all really good at making one way or another. We, as humans, we love to make excuses for things. So I think this will be a great way to kind of find the motivation that we need to get done what we're supposed to get done.
And I think it's just the practicality of a subject matter like this is a really good thing. I heard a long time ago that when people say I can't, it's oftentimes I won't.
Yep.
And I was ordering something online last night, and I was talking to the sales rep, and I said, I wanted to require a signature for this because there's a few bucks, and I wanted to be sure that somebody just didn't leave it on the front porch. And he says, well, after he took my credit card and everything, he said, I can't do that. And then I said, well, that may be a showstopper for me. I mean, that's really important. Well, let me check. And then he came back. He was gone for forever, and he came back twice. And he said, well, I guess we can do it. I found somebody that knows how to do it. So there was an I can't. That was really I don't know how.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of flavors of I can't. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to in the series this evening. Is I think that I can't has a lot of different aspects.
Yep.
Yep. Well, good. Very good. Well, we're going to be tonight in Exodus chapter 4. So you all out there can get your Bibles ready. Linda says we really understand about making excuses. I think it's going to be universal tonight. So thank you for watching. Appreciate that. Exodus chapter 4, and we're going to find Moses fully into excuse mode. So, but just to get our conversation started, let's go to our icebreaker for this evening.
All right, Kayla.
This is a funny one, and I wonder if you guys we're gonna own up to it, or if we're gonna not tell the truth here. But did you ever use a fake excuse in school to get out of doing something that you didn't want to do? And then, if so, what was it?
All right, I'm just going to throw myself on that pile to begin with. I absolutely did. I didn't think I didn't do it often. And to be honest with you, as I was thinking through this, I could only really think of one time that I know that I did it. But to be honest, it was a very selfish reason. And so, there's times when I'm sure I probably did it more often than I realized. But nevertheless, I owned up to it. I did it. And it was in relation to a paper that was due. And I made an elaborate excuse to turn it in a day late, and that was just not right.
Jess, did you have one you were going to?
I can't. I'm sure I did. I'm absolutely positive I did. I can't recall a specific example, but it's probably if I could imagine something on I forgot or I didn't know.
Yeah.
You didn't tell us. Like the whole blame shifting thing can't be my fault.
can I ask an opinion question here?
Sure.
For Jess and for Kayla? I wonder if sometimes the line between a legitimate excuse and a fake excuse gets a little bit blurry. Okay, let me explain what I mean by that. So you get up one morning and you think, well, I'm not feeling perfect, but I'm not feeling really, really sick. Do I go into work? And, I think sometimes that's a hard thing for people. Some people just default to, I'm going into work unless I always hear the phrase providentially hindered. Okay. And as long as I can walk and not throw up or, I am going to go to work. There's other people that have a different level of that, a different, and, well, I don't want to make anybody else sick. So, people, where do you think sometimes we struggle with figuring out what's a legitimate excuse and what's not a fair excuse?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like that's usually it just comes down to your intent behind it. Like if you truly feel like you wake up and you're like kind of iffy, like, oh, I might, not feel the greatest, but you're thinking, oh, good. I don't feel the greatest. I'm going to use this day to I'm going to binge watch something on Netflix all day long. Yes, I can get out of work. It's just, I guess your intent behind it, but I'm sure there's always that like borderline, like, is it legitimate? Is it not? That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes your mind can play tricks on you.
Yes.
You can think yourself into sickness if you try hard enough. And
I believe that's the case.
Yeah. I should have mentioned earlier, we do have a study guide for this series. And Kaylee, you want to tell us how people can get that if they're interested?
Yeah, if you go on to our website, I actually put it right onto our news section. So if you just scroll down to news, you'll see it. Very first thing, just click on I Quit. And you should see right there in orange, you'll say week 1 study guide. So it's easy to find, or you can get on Facebook and go to our most recent Facebook post, and I have shared it there as well. So a couple of ways you can find it.
All right, very good.
So no excuses for not having it.
Well played.
Sorry, I had to throw it in there.
Very, very true. Okay, let me just, if you don't mind, I'll just take a moment, kind of set the scene of our passage for tonight. This is the story, obviously, from Moses, and this is he encountering God at the burning bush. Okay, so God has shown up and says, I want you to go to Pharaoh, and I want to lead my people. I want you to lead my people Israel out. And he says, who am I? Or he says, who do I say that you are? I am that I am, and all that. And then in chapter 4, he starts with the God, you got the wrong guy approach. Okay. Classic. There's someone that can do this better than I. All right. In verse 10, then Moses said to the Lord, I, my Lord, am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. And I always feel like I should probably read that with a halting voice just to get the sound right. And the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth, or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall say. And then later he does give him Aaron, who basically becomes co-spokesman, can we say it that way, with him in this story. So our focus is on his excuse and God's response to it. That's kind of in the broadest parameters what we're looking at tonight from the Word.
Excellent.
Well, perfect. So there's our passage. Now you guys kind of got the scene is set. We'll go right into question 1, which is, what do you think are some of the most common excuses that people use that keep them from changing? Very just basic. We'll just get an understanding of what are some things that people will say is the reason they can't do something.
Don't have time.
Yep. That's a big one.
Don't have time.
Yep. Don't have time. Too busy. Yep.
If it's a specific job, say like even in a church environment, there'd be somebody better than me to do that job. There's always somebody who would be better qualified. I'm not the right person for that kind of an activity.
They're using the Moses method.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's basically what he's doing here. You got this is going to take somebody that's got a good verbal skills, and I'm not the guy that has the good verbal skills. So
And sometimes,
somehow, Lord, you made the mistake, and that's where that always gets us in trouble because
yeah.
not the way it
And
works.
sometimes if it's a certain task, you know, like where they need a bunch of volunteers or a bunch of people, sometimes, well, I'll try to be there, you know? And in reality, I'll try is just a euphemism for, you know, I doubt that I'll be there, but I'm not going to tell you that right now because I don't want to disappoint you.
Yes, it's a way of saying I'm going to lower the expectations so low that when I don't show up, you're not going to be shocked.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I know for me, one of mine is I'm too tired.
Yeah.
That's a good one to use, but that is definitely one of my go-tos. I also think another one is no motivation. They'll just say, I'm just, I have no motivation. I always think about like excuses for not like exercising, and poster child right here for making excuses for not doing that. And it's always just, I'm just not motivated. I can't find the motivation to do it, or I can't, just find the will to get up and go do whatever it is that I need to do. And I always find that funny because I feel like we always think that motivation is just like this thing that magically it's like this magic power that you get. But motivation is something that you have to work for. It doesn't just magically appear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think sometimes people blame a variety of factors for their action.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have a gentleman that I worked with, and he came from a Greek nationality, and he would lose his temper halfway often. And his excuse was, well, I'm Greek. That's just the way I am. And I had another friend who used this kind of a thing. I don't know if it's an excuse or exactly where it falls into the mix, but he would say, well, if you don't like that, I'm sorry, which he really wasn't, but I'm sorry. But again, that's just the way I am. And the implication there is that if it's the way I am, I can't change. That's how God made me. No, that's not how God made you, And God makes us with the ability to change, along with responsibility is our ability to respond. So we get to choose that. But I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. They always have something or someone to blame their predicament on. And that way I don't have to take responsibility. It's not my issue. It's just the way I was raised, maybe my ethnicity, or maybe just the way I was reared. But I'm not responsible for my poor actions.
Mm.
Yeah, we have no issue at all coming up with any sort of excuse to get out of something that we really don't want to do. We will find one way or another to justify why we're not going to do it.
And you notice there's some good Bible verses that address that kind of an excuse. Philippians 4:13. It's my wife's life verse. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Yep. So now wait a minute. If I say I can't do that, then I'm just really denying the power of God to make those kind of changes in my life. Or Matthew 7:7. I always like that verse. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened unto you. So, as Christians especially, we have the Almighty God, the all power of God that we can call upon whenever we have that need.
Yep.
And you go back to the excuses. If that behavior sets in very early, if you've been around little children, they can excuse you to death.
Oh boy!
It's sort of the default setting of our humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I like Andrea's response. She said people also blame others for keeping them from changing, which, yes, it's so easy to put it all on someone else's fault. Like it's better if I just say it's someone else. It's not me, it's them.
Yeah. And that's always a losing proposition, because if you, as she states it, if you put the responsibility for my behavior on someone else, then I have just surrendered all input, all control, all hope.
Mm.
If they would just treat me better, if the company would just treat me better, I could really be a successful employee.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Now, I understand there other people do have their responsibilities. That's a real thing. So I'm not negating that, but you got to operate on personal responsibility.
So what do you think, we'll move on to question 2. In your opinion, what do you think God's response is to our excuses?
Well, I think we have the answer right in front of us in chapter 4.
Yep.
And let me just read verse 11. I love this. This is a classic. Okay. You know, I'm not eloquent. I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. And the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? I mean, what a showstopper of a question. You know, my mouth is not up to par. But first of all, God says, I want to use your mouth. And then Moses says, my mouth is not up to par. And God turns around and says, well, who makes mouths? Mm-hmm. Who's the mouth maker here? And it's just like, God knows what he's getting with us. And then this verse is very, I don't know what the word is. This is an important passage. Because here's what it says. Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute? Those people who cannot speak. The deaf, the seeing, or the blind, have not I the Lord? So you get the hint that even what we term liabilities or disabilities, God chooses, allows, however that works. But he's involved in that process and can even use disabilities for his glory. My strength is made perfect in weakness. And, you know, my grace is sufficient for you. All those things the Paul encountered when he's talking about the thorn in the flesh. So basically, don't accept any excuses. And I can shoot down every excuse because I made you. End of argument.
And I think that's a really good point. You know, if God only chose to use the eloquent, the handsome, the intelligent, you know, you wonder how much of the glory would be for them and how much would be for the glory of God. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, people would assume that if he always chose the perfect candidate, well, he chose them because they were so talented and skilled and gifted and all the other things. But when he uses someone that doesn't have the gifts, the gifts like, you know, here we have Moses, who's going to be a negotiator for the nation of Israel. You would think he would choose somebody who was very eloquent of speech.
Yes.
But he chooses just the opposite. And I think that is it's also a great insight that God can use anybody. You know, he uses who he chooses to use. And it may not always be the person that appears to us to be the most skillful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a certain amount of, this is slightly off subject if you allow it, rabbit trail, but there's a certain amount of danger for the people that are, how should you say, abundantly gifted and very talented and, you know, fit all the template of what we view as just desirability of, ability, desirability, whatever. There's some real danger in that. Because then you can begin the subtle thought of, well, it's because I'm smart. It's because I'm good. I'm insightful. I'm strategic. And none of that is true. None of that is true. You know.
I also like, again, if you go down to verse 14, that his anger burned. You know, the more Moses just kept pushing and pushing that he was not meant to do this job, the angrier he gets. So whenever I read this question, how disappointed he must be the more we just keep making excuse after excuse when, you know, he, just like we've been talking about, he's the one who made our mouths. He made us. He knows what we're capable of doing. So, you know, by saying, I can't do this and just saying, you chose wrong. You're wrong. You did this. You know, this is your fault for choosing the wrong person, basically. You know, God, he gives you what you need to accomplish what he's called you to do. So once you hear that, it's like, oh, well, there is no excuse, you know, what you're meant to do, who you're meant to be. You have no excuse for not doing it because he's given you everything you need for it.
Yeah. I love that God gives you everything you need for what he's called you to do.
That's right.
Let me just read it just so we get the whole flow. Cause you mentioned 14. Let me read the intervening and go into 14 because this is important. So he said in 11, who's made man's mouth? I make these, you know, the deaf and the seeing and the blind. Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall say. Okay, so I'm going to be there. I'm going to give you the words to say. This is okay. And then he comes back around. This is where the fire of his anger is kindled. But he said, "Oh my Lord, please send by the hand of whomever else you may send." Even after all that, he's still on this thing of somebody else. And that's when verse 14, it says, "So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, it's not Aaron." He goes into the whole Aaron thing. But yeah, I loved I would not have probably thought of that term, but he disappointed is the right term. Angry, disappointed to that point.
Yeah.
I think sometimes too, God has a desire to use people in a way that we had not anticipated. Okay. I remember asking a gentleman in our church one year if he would consider being a deacon. And he said, "Well, Joe," he said, I'm not a theologian. I know what I believe, and I think I can take in the Bible to show you why. But I'm sure there's, I'm sure there's people who are much more skilled in, handling God's word that maybe that you should ask one of them to be a deacon. Here's what I liked about it. He went ahead and he did accept it. He did accept the position. And he was a servant's servant. I mean, he helped so many people in our church. And he helped them in ways. He had the gift of compassion. And I mean, what a perfect gift for a deacon, that he would be able to work with people and help them and get them through times in their lives that were just extremely difficult. And, maybe he wasn't the top theologian in the world, but boy, could he help folks. He really knew how to do that.
Very good.
Well, I will move us along. Then we'll go on to question 3. And that is, if God calls us to do something like he did with Moses, how can we be sure to accomplish his will? So essentially, what can we do to make sure that when God calls us to do something, how can we, train our brain to remember, like, okay, don't make excuses. What do I need to do to make sure that this gets done?
One thing I would just throw in there, we have to be moving away from a feelings-based standard of living.
Yes.
Well, I don't feel it anymore. I don't feel this, or I feel something differently, right? And feelings are real things. They're not to be, we don't deny them. Then they have real meaning for us, that are impactful to us. But if we can, with God's help, move to what I would call principle-based. What's the principle? What God has revealed to us. In this case, Moses certainly had there was no ambiguity here. I want you to go to Pharaoh, and I want you to, do these things. I mean, it was crystal clear. God was speaking to him in an audible voice of the physical manifestation. Oftentimes we don't have that, but we do have black ink on white paper printed in our Bibles. So that's for the most part a lot of the removal of ambiguity as well. So so operating on the principles, not how I feel, because those are going to fluctuate. And sometimes there's some memory from the past that will trigger us, or some bring feelings back, or our physical condition affects our emotional condition, or whatever. So it's just principle-based versus feelings-based. Or maybe we can say it this way: faith-based versus feelings-based. And I've been thinking about that as I've been praying for getting back into our Angel series this coming Sunday. So I'm giving a little advance material there, as we're going to be talking about that again.
But that kind of approach is not how society often chooses to make decisions. It seems like so many people in the world today, they choose to make their decisions exactly as Jess was saying, on how they feel, rather than even things they know to be right or wrong. They make excuses based on the fact that that's not how I feel. And then there's this follow-up that is, I've seen attached to so many decisions. Well, if I do this, I'll be happy, and God wants me to be happy, which God does care about your happiness, but he's much more concerned about your holiness. And that's just something that people just tack on to. Again, they twist a reason and they make an excuse out of it because, well, if it doesn't make me happy, it must not be right. That's just a lie. And you're right, Jess. We need to get back to more of a faith-based decision-making process.
Yep. This always comes back to my mind whenever I think of making excuses. I remember this was probably 7, 8. I mean, this was probably 7, 8 years ago. It was a while. We were doing Tower of Toys at the church, and we always do a service, before we would do, the actual toy stuff. And a friend of mine, we decided we were going to do the special music for it. We were going to do a duet together. And so day one goes great. We sing our song. It was good. The whole service went fine. Day two comes, and that whole morning, it was just, we were late getting there. There was traffic. So we were late getting to the service. When I get there, I didn't have time to practice like I wanted to. And then my partner doesn't even show up. And I don't know where he is. I don't know what's going on. And all of a sudden, I just made every excuse in the book of why I was not performing that day. I was not going to sing the song. I couldn't do it. I hadn't practiced. I was running late. My friend didn't show up to sing it with me. Like, I can't do it. And I just remember, I just cried because I was so just frustrated. I was sad that I knew I was disappointing everyone. And I remember talking to my dad afterwards and telling him, I was like, just feel like I've let everyone down. Are you disappointed with me? And he's like, no, I'm not disappointed with you. However, you did, rob God the opportunity of gaining glory from just having faith that he would help you through it. Yeah. That was his way of showing you it's not anything that you do. It was what he was going to do through you. Mm-hmm. And the guilt just ate me for probably the rest of that week. I felt horrible. I was like, I've just robbed God of this chance to work through me. And so that was a learning moment for me, for sure.
And a good lesson that you're still able to access these years later.
Yeah.
My question is, did your friend have a good excuse for not showing up?
Sure. We'll say yes.
Okay. All right. That's it.
But yeah, so, it's just the way you're going to make sure you accomplish his will is you're just going to have to put feelings aside. Like you said, this isn't going to be feelings based. You're just going to have to trust that when God wants you to do something, he's already given you the ability to do it. It's not going to happen. You already have it. You've already got that power to tap into. That's the Holy Spirit. So I think it also comes down to, you need to find the right reason for why you're doing something. And we can get excuses for all sorts of things. One of the things I mentioned earlier is I feel like we'll make all sorts of excuses for why we don't want to exercise, or we don't want to do something that, doesn't seem fun. But if you think about it, if you don't have the right reason for what you're doing, for why you're trying to change something, I mean, it's going to fall through. It's never going to work out. You've got to have the right reason. And that's the reason that God has called you to do it.
Mm-hmm. I just was saying before my mic gets back on that we need to always check our motivations. I mean, that's a hard thing to do and a difficult thing to do. But why am I doing this? And again, it's the spectrum between to make me look good or make God look good, for his glory or mine, oftentimes.
Good point.
And something that we'll mention again here at the end is, first of all, you've got to realize, what is God wanting you to change in your life? What is God wanting to be different in your life? And then once you figure that out, why is he wanting it to be different? Once you answer those two questions, I mean, your excuses are pretty much gone. Once you've figured out the what it is and the why he wants you to do it, bye-bye excuses.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Are we ready to move on to number 4?
Yes. So number 4.
I love this question.
In the previous verses of Exodus 4, God gives Moses multiple examples of his power. So why did Moses still not trust God to help him?
Can I take a stab at it?
Please.
Absolutely.
This one baffles me. I just don't understand.
Yeah. Well, let me get my Bible out of the way there. Of course, right before this, he gives them signs. He gives him the sign of throw your shepherd's staff on the ground, just throw it down there. When you throw it down, it's going to turn into a snake. It's going to turn into a serpent. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And then when you grab it by the tail, when you reach out and grab it, it's going to suddenly now become a staff again. And also he talks about that you can stick your hand into your, like inside your garment. And when you pull it out, it's going to be leprous, which would have been just like, and put it back in, pull it out, it's healed again. So these are signs that he demonstrated, that he proved. But the second part of the question is, why did Moses still not trust God to help him? There's a little bit of history here. There's a reason that Moses has been out in the desert for 40 years taking care of his father-in-law's sheep, even though he was raised as in maybe not a prince of Egypt, but he was raised as a privileged part of the ruling class, if we could say it that way, of Pharaoh's daughter, the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter. There, I got it out right. So you remember he was a murderer. He killed an Egyptian who was abusing a Hebrew, and he tries to cover it by a quick burial and hiding the body. But he finds out the next day, this is already known. The word is out. So he runs from his life. And the last person Moses ever wanted to see again was Pharaoh, because he was a man that he thought had a wanted poster stuck up on the walls back in Egypt. And so he had a question: am I going to trust God in this situation, or am I going to avoid Pharaoh? I mean, so I think he was caught up. Most of all, I think the excuse was mostly driven by fear of what will happen to me when I get back and Pharaoh. We also remember he says, when I tell the people that God spoke to me, they're going to ask me, what's your name? And what am I telling them? And he says, I am that I am sent you. You tell them I am sent you, which is a sort of a captivating, mystifying answer on God's part. So he was concerned about the people, how they're going to receive him, and then how's Pharaoh going to react? So again, it's this horizontal level of my fears versus the vertical level of faith.
That's a good point. I think sometimes fear definitely does enter into the subject matter as well. Sometimes it's not so much a matter of trust as an issue of our will. If we just don't want to do something. I'm looking at what Pam Drought says here in Acts 7:22. Stephen says he was young. Moses was powerful in word and in actions. And then in 7:25, Stephen says, before Moses went into the wilderness, when he killed the Egyptian, Moses assumed people understood God, would use him to deliver them, but they didn't understand. He failed when trying to do it on his own. And so something I wonder if his excuse came from past experiences of failure. The problem is he failed because he did it on his own instead of allowing God to do it.
Yep.
Thank you, Pam. That's a good statement.
I tried this deliver thing once before and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking for round two of being the deliverer guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest I'm not saying this is necessarily the case with Moses, but I think it is the case with some people. When we're used to not doing anything for the Lord, there's kind of almost an inertia. Do you remember inertia from your high school physics, right? It keeps a body in motion in a straight line, and it keeps the body at rest. And it takes, I think, if we haven't done anything for the Lord, or if there's, I'll use Kayla's example. If we haven't exercised for a while, there's a certain amount of inertia just getting off the couch and getting into the game. I think you see that sometimes with people who have been out of church for a while. They really struggle with getting back into the church. It's almost like there's an inertia that says, people will make fun of you. They're not going to understand. So, and we have a hard time moving sometimes, getting our mind and body in motion and in action. And I think that inertia, which is, of course, that's just an excuse. That's not an actual factor, but it is something we struggle with.
Yeah. If we could bring up Andrea's quote there from a moment ago, I'll make sure we read that. People also blame others for keeping them from changing. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
That's right back into the old excuse loop,
mm,
and and that probably somehow was in the back of Moses' mind as well.
mm.
We need to move along, and let's go to question number 5. This also going to be a little uncomfortable?
Yeah. Number 5 is, why do you think we're so quick to rely on our own strength to do things when we know that we have an all-powerful God we can rely on?
That's a great and convicting question.
For me, I always, when you go to do something, you want to take the credit for it. If you're going to put work into something, you want to be able to, get the praise for it. You want to be able to say, yes, look what I did. I did this. Are you proud of me? So if we rely on God to help us do it, ultimately we know all credit goes to him. All praise goes to him for what we do. So I think sometimes that can be a reason that we're so quick to just kind of like, I can do it. I've got this. I can do everything on my own. I'm just fine. I don't need help from anyone. But I mean, that is definitely the wrong answer for that one.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think some people just think, well, I've got it. I've done this before, or I know I can do this, so I don't need anybody else's help. Or maybe there's even a concern, well, if God helps me on this one, will I owe him something? And I think there's just a lot of rabbit trails that our mind can go down when we're trying to justify why we're not asking God for the help that we desperately need.
Yep. Very true. Good comments both. Why don't we go?
It could also be just a forgetfulness factor. If you're not used to asking God for help, if you're not used to relying on him, if you've gotten to a habit of not doing that, you just sort of forget, oh, that's right. I've got this ultimate power source right here that can help me accomplish these things.
Yeah. I'll just borrow a statement from last Sunday's message, which was trying to be a summary statement of where he talks about, if my people will humble themselves and pray and seek my face. That seek my face line from 2 Chronicles 7:14 is simply this, that the starting point of devotion, which is that consistent living by faith, the starting point of that is just consistent worship. The starting point of devotion is consistent worship, that we reserve time to come before God, honor him, listen to him, and it just sort of resets everything. I'll borrow a term that I was impressed with years ago from my friend Joe Moore. We need to recalibrate our thinking, our feelings, our everything back to him. And that comes through worship. That's what we do on Sundays. That's what we do individually. That's what we do throughout life.
I like Andrea's comment. Our human side also wants to trust in what's seen instead of what's unseen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is the enemy of faith.
Yep.
The opposite of faith. The opposite of faith. Very well. Good said. Okay, our bottom line. You go ahead and read that for us.
Yeah, our bottom line is, do what God has given you the power to do and trust that he will take care of what you can't do. So again, it just comes down to that trust that God has already given you this power. So if he's called you to do something, and it can be anything, it can be as, minor as, getting healthy, which isn't a minor thing, but you know what I'm saying. But it's just about anything, whether you're going to take that class or whether you're going to, pursue a new job. There's no excuse. Trust that God will take care of what you can't do. You just got to go for it.
Yeah.
For our next steps, again, this was something that we had already kind of talked about, but this week, just ask yourself those 2 questions that we mentioned earlier. What does God want you to change or do differently? And then once you figure out what it is, ask, why does God want me to make this change? Because once you answer those 2 questions, that eliminates all excuses. There's no room for excuses after that.
Yeah. And those are great questions and great diagnostic questions, focusing questions in our lives. And and I think it's important for us to practice, practice the no excuse policy. Well, what happened here? Well, what really happened here is I just didn't do what I should have done, or my priorities are messed up. I didn't realize what was most important. I let something a minor consequence robbed me of my time, or I didn't, I was up late doing something, and I got up late. It's the reason I'm late for work today, or I'm groggy when I walk into work today. It's, just that practice, that discipline of putting the blame, the responsibility back on self, verbalizing it, saying it, admitting it. And sometimes it just takes practice to do that.
Amen.
This last statement, I think, is another important one, just to mention it and then we can head off. But just to quit waiting around for things to happen on their own and do what God has called you to do, which is go and trust him. We don't use the excuse of, well, I'm just waiting for God to open the door, or I'm just waiting for God to give me blank so that I can accomplish what I need to. Like I said earlier, he's already given that to you. He has already given you what you need to accomplish what he's called you to do. Mm-hmm. So just go and trust him.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. And, get busy on that. Well, thank you all for joining us for this Life Talk tonight. I do want to just give you a little bit of those of you that are a regular part of our online family here. We got a few more weeks of this series, but starting August 11, at the church, we're going back to in-person services. So we will not be doing this on Wednesday night, but just be watching our social media and our website. We'll get it all out there. We're going to have a new time and a new slot to do this in. Okay. And we're going to tweak a few things. We're working on that, but we'll still be doing it. Just won't be Wednesday because we don't want to compete with what we're doing in person. And also some of the faces that you see on your screen are going to have lots of other things going on Wednesday night. So, but we're not going to abandon you. We're not going to abandon you. We will ask for your patience and understanding as we readjust. So that's coming up. But for the remainder of July and through the first Wednesday of August, we're going to be right here every Wednesday, Lord willing, to share life with you and talk about it as we explore the Word together. So, Joe, thank you. Kayla, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank Lisa, who you don't see, but she's been operating the controls behind the scenes tonight. I appreciate that. So until next time, we will I'm going to go back to our opening statement. I quit. It's time to quit doing what isn't working for us. And one of the things we need to quit is this whole excuse thing. Great discussion tonight. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next time.
Good night.